Welcome, everyone. I'm Amy Seeley, president of Seeley Test Pros and LEAP, helping students to succeed in all kinds of tests from 8th grade to grad school throughout Ohio.
And I'm Mike Bergen, president of Chariot Learning, helping students with Test School and Life based out of Rochester, New York.
Between the two of us today, we have over 60 years of experience at the highest levels of the test preparation and supplemental education industries.
We both love to talk and learn about the latest issues in education, testing, and admissions. So let's get down to tests and the rest. The fascinating topic we want to explore today is ourselves. Welcome to another episode of EXTEMP with Amy and Mike. Hello, Amy.
Hello, Mike. It's lovely to be here with you.
It is always a pleasure, and we meet so often, and we talk about so many amazing topics with so many phenomenal people. And as ever, it's just nice to get to talk about ourselves. You're a phenomenal person, so let's talk about you.
Oh, please, Mike. Yeah, no, it's funny because as we approach these episodes, sometimes I say to myself, "Oh, what am I going to talk about?" You know, when we get to the recording. And this one, I will say, some hot topics this particular week. So I'm excited to get into a couple of them that I want to talk about with you. First, of course, is, we podcasted with Maureen Foreman about 2 weeks ago, right before the March SAT. And we did the episode right on how's this new digital SAT going. And we were so excited to have her.
How it started, how it's going. We love this. This was an amazing episode. So Maureen Foreman, for people who didn't listen to the episode yet, is the vice president of SAT Suite program for College Board. So she is one of the individuals who helped usher the digital SAT into existence. She really managed, she was part of the team that brought it in. She's overseeing it now. Maureen's delightful. Really always a pleasure to speak with her. And our episode was, and it was kind of an honor, I thought, Amy, that we were able to do basically the year retrospective
Sure.
of the first administration of the SAT in the US and the 2-year retrospective of the first administration of the Blue Book Digital SAT Anywhere. But it was also, we were congratulatory. You were like, yeah, you did it, right? We were like, you guys did a fantastic job and everything was so great.
The irony of that feel. But right. The thing is, the reason that recording was important was because they'd come so far. I mean, we're talking about 2 years of administration internationally, 1 year nationally or domestically. And so, of course, fast forward, the Saturday after, that episode aired, the March 8th SAT, and I think the best way I can describe it would be the debacle, right?
It was a debacle, and look, it wasn't a debacle for everyone. It was only a debacle for
5%. They're saying
first wave of test takers because it was a time zone bound issue. So it was a rolling issue that they finally were able to restore Saturday morning.
Well,
but
no, that's not
everybody who tested before.
No, that's not what happened.
That's not what happened?
No, I mean, basically, they discovered it, I think, in Vietnam. So I think test takers in Vietnam were the hardest hit because they realized there was a problem. Now, of course, what that means is they start to try to fix the problem. The issue became that they had to make some changes in the configuration of time, right? Essentially, students should have had a 5-hour window of time, but they were given a 3-hour window of time.
So the first error created the second error.
Well, the error became once they could go in there and change it, what they didn't know is how it would correct itself, essentially. So what happened is then they eventually realized students would have to re-log into Blue Book. So what that meant was by the time it was being given in the US, some people might have been given the notice to log out of Blue Book and log back in, which would have then allowed those changes they made to take place.
Which is contrary to we always tell people, maybe restart it in the morning before you get to the test site, but also be logged into Blue Book when you show up.
Right. So the problem is if you were logged into Blue Book and you hadn't re-logged in, now, then what happened is once they saw that was the issue, then they were notifying test centers of, you need to log out and log back in. So what did that mean? To make the correction for some people, it meant they were already testing. So then, of course, you had students who were logging out during their time, if you will.
Right.
And then they were losing time and then re-logging back in. So you can imagine for most students, if they were going to be affected, potentially the effect would have happened for math, right? Because we know that the last two modules are math. What is interesting to me would be if I were a potential high scorer, we all know the potential high score gets a harder second module of math, which we also know is very difficult to finish, even given the full amount of time.
That's the one that you need the most time on.
Right.
That's the section.
And then of course, there's a whole slew of things. You could have had students who actually did finish or complete the section, but they were rushed or they had to guess. You could have had students who finished. Like most of the students that I worked with personally, none of them were affected by it here in Ohio.
None of our students anywhere had an issue. So it was localized. Long story short, it was a debacle, and it really showed the vulnerabilities of digital testing. I know because what happened 2 days later, the ACT in-school test, which was a digital test, was canceled everywhere because of technical difficulties and rescheduled for a couple of weeks later. I'm not saying that digital testing doesn't have great benefits and that this is not the future, but students should be ready for these things to happen. I wrote a couple of articles on this, right? Like I wrote What Happens When Tests Go Wrong to talk about the fact that since tests have been a thing, there have been test day nightmares. There have been problems.
Well, when I met with Maureen earlier this week, and you can imagine the horror. I mean, that everybody at College Board over the weekend, what they were trying to do in the moment to correct, and they were having to make decisions not knowing, and that was, I think, the challenge. They had to make some decisions not knowing whether they would correct the issue because they were dealing with a problem in real time that they were trying to correct. But I was saying, you and me, Mike, we've been in this business for a long time. So I remembered a couple of other debacles of, do you remember with the SAT when sections 9 and 10 were thrown out because there was a printing issue with the booklets, in which case College Board had to score those tests minus when it was a 10-section test? That was one I remembered. The other I remembered was a time where, do you remember they misscored tests because of humidity? The answer sheets, they realized had not correctly scored them, like in a Scantron world, and so they had to go back and rescore.
Those are errors that had to do with the format of the test. Then I have examples of, like, you've heard it happens all the time. A school forgets to send the tests in, or somebody loses all the answer sheets,
they fall off a truck.
They fall off a truck, right?
So in all fairness to testing, just because it's digital, paper testing presented with random
had its
weird
own problems as well. 100%.
Although I suppose some would say, well, a printing error is something. Although I guess, what do? Quality control. You check in every booklet to make sure every single booklet is printed with everything.
You know that can't happen.
So
right?
I do give College Board a lot of credit here in that it was a human error that they tried to correct as quickly as they could in the moment. And then, of course, then there are the repercussions of what do they do? What do they do to remedy it for students, right? In terms of...
Well, that's the thing, right? And so I know that there are people who are trying to advocate for better remedies. The historical remedy, if your test was impacted for any reason, including someone in your room messed up, your proctor messed up, there was some kind of chaos, an example of a deer crashing into the window or something like that happened, and somebody reports it, and then the entire room or the school or the state or whatever it is invalidated. What is your recourse? Your recourse is a refund.
It has always been basically a refund and a retest is generally what it's been.
A refund and a retest. It would reschedule. They'll, very often they'll give you the opportunity. And this happened on the February ACT. No. The December ACT. I knew students who were going to take the test in the Midwest whose sites were canceled because of weather, right? Nothing you can do about it. Weather. And so there was a retest scheduled for January. They didn't have to wait till February. Right. They had a retest scheduled. That's just standard. And that's why, one of the things I wrote about was what happens when tests go wrong. And the other thing I wrote about is a reminder, always have a plan B.
Yeah.
Don't put all your eggs in a single test dates basket.
That's why you have to have a testing, 3 test strategy at very least, or stack testing so that one of those, you hit the
Exactly.
mark. So it
Yeah.
is, it's life, things happen. And that's why students really testing early and planning to test often is important in these times, because that will lead us to our next topic, right? Testing in these
Well,
times
this is
matters.
something you are particularly excited
I
about, aren't
am, I'm not going to lie. I was ecstatic. Well, so I was at a WACAC, right? This Sunday, Monday.
What does OACAC stand for, Amy?
It's the Ohio
Association of College
Association for
Admissions Counselors?
College
Something like that.
Admissions Counseling. I can never
Yeah.
the ACACs, lots of ACACs, but it's Ohio's
That's the
ACAC.
Ohio, that's the local ACAC. Everybody knows
Correct.
an ACAC, but there's lots of
Yeah.
local ones, and OACAC is Ohio.
Which is awesome to go to. I was like super excited. It was in Dayton. I'd never been to University of Dayton, which sounds crazy, but I was there. I got my pennant because I always claim those when I go to a college campus.
Hmm.
But it actually, a lot of college admissions professionals, so a lot goes. So got to spend time with them. But I also got the benefit of being able to hang out with some of our Cincinnati counselors for LEAP. So that was really, really awesome. And my target, Mike, at a WACAC was Beth from Ohio State University, who is a head of admissions,
Hmm.
where I came right up to her and I said, like, have you guys made a decision about test optional? And she said, well, we've made one, but we've not released it. She said, and you could tell she was sort of like, we are anxious to release this information. We just have not.
Yes, we're not allowed to share this bomb I'm about to drop.
I'm here representing the National Test Prep Association, so I want you to know that we want answers. She's very sweet. I really like her. But in any case, she said it should be forthcoming in the next couple of weeks. She said so. Fast forward to a couple days later, and our dear friend Keith Lofton,
Yes.
who, by the way, was on our podcast about attending big public universities a few years ago. Well, he's no longer at Ohio State, even though he was there for well over 20 years. He is now a high school counselor. And he so sweetly yesterday texted me, the word's in, Ohio State's requiring test scores. And I was like, oh my God. And so I was super excited that I must have been the first person he thought of to share that information with. And so once we got confirmation, it was like, because obviously, Mike, I own a test. This is very self-interested. I will readily admit that. I own a company in Cleveland. I own a company in Cincinnati. Ohio State is ridiculously popular with many or most of our students. And Ohio State going back to test required will set an entirely different tone for test prep in Ohio, because if you want to go,
sure.
You're going to have to submit a score. And prior to COVID, their average or median ACT was 29.
Yeah.
Which is, as we know, highly selective, number.
The repercussions across the country are significant. We had our good friend David Blowbaum in to record a podcast that we haven't released yet about the predictive validity of the SAT and ACT. And it's just, we've gone through this era where schools that needed to use the standardized objective assessments did not, right? There's certainly schools that can make the case for the kinds of schools that they are and the students that they attract, they don't need test scores. Because they're looking for other things.
Sure.
But large state universities, every single one should be using test scores without a doubt. And it's the easiest, most effective, least expensive way to evaluate students in conjunction with all the other information you're getting about them.
And one of my dear friends who used to be a high school counselor is now a reader. She's been a reader for apps for Ohio State for a couple of years. And she said you can tell from the apps, it's difficult because you can tell students who didn't know whether they should or shouldn't send a test score, and you cannot look at it. So you cannot, she said, fill in the gaps. And she said it's very difficult. It's very difficult to read those apps absent test scores. And so certainly, Ohio State isn't lacking for apps. And so I'm that obviously factoring. But ultimately what we are seeing is, as you and we both know, test scores just predict so much. And it's ultimately the success of the student on campus, meaning schools are looking out for students in terms of making sure that the students that arrive on their campuses are well prepared to deal with the academic rigor and ultimately graduate from that institution. And so to me, they're not a barrier. as
Right.
much as a signal that, hey, we believe that you'll be successful here, and this is what your test score signal to us.
They're a signal, right? And if the signal is bad, if you're getting bad signal, or you don't like what the signal's saying, fix the cause. Go back and figure out why students are applying to school, graduating high school with, 20th percentile, 10th percentile ACT scores, but they think that they're going to survive in a rigorous academic environment.
Well, that, of course, with talking to David, was that the fact that when your GPAs are all 4.0,
Yes.
that metric doesn't serve any purpose anymore. Like, you can't use it because it's not signaling anything when those grades are equal. So therefore, test scores have actually, I mean, due to grade inflation, test scores now are just way more important to differentiate for students. Unfortunately, unfortunately for some students, but
Unfortunately for some, fortunately for others, look, we have been consistent. You and I have been consistent for 5 years on this show. We've been consistent about following the data regarding testing, regarding grade inflation, regarding predictive validity, regarding admission standards, and the fact that lots of students fail to persist, right?
the
Like
good
college
news,
persistence, all these issues we follow, we talk to experts. Nothing's changed except that public perception oscillates wildly depending
right?
on
It's
circumstances.
so funny, Mike, because I feel like January 2020 in Boca, when we had our first conference, right? And we were like test option. Yeah, I mean, just so the irony, I finally feel like those 5 years have
Yeah.
just disappeared. Like
Yeah.
now I can, on the anniversary, I say of COVID starting to, I'm like, okay, I feel like we finally turned the whole corner. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I wonder what the next corner holds. I mean,
It
it's never
can't be worse
done,
than the
right?
last corner, Mike. It cannot be worse than the last corner.
The American public never
Oh,
underestimate
well, yeah, truth,
the hot
truth.
takes and illogical decisions that Americans will make.
Well, we aren't going to dive into politics of the Department of Education right now. Let's just put it that way, right?
Exactly.
That's a whole
Exactly.
other.
Yeah, that's
We'll
that's
deal with that
different.
later.
And we're not a political
We're not. We're
podcast.
not. So, what have you been up to over the last month? What's going on with you?
So I am still enjoying the leisure that comes with being the president emeritus of the National Test Prep Association. You're still going to the board meetings. You're still doing your things. I have my minor contributions. It is quite delightful. And I've just been working, I mean, Chariot Learning's doing fantastic. We're working with so many students all over the country now,
Hmm.
but, doing great things here. My team is great. We're really happy. I personally, I had a perfect score on the February ACT with the student I was working with.
Which
I
is always
felt
so
great about
awesome.
that. I
Hmm.
love that stuff. I mean,
Yeah,
look, obviously, we celebrate all improvement
100%.
and improve.
Growth is growth, right?
Growth is growth, and growth should be celebrated.
Hmm.
I take on a lot of those perfect score potential students just because I love that challenge. That's, like
They're fun.
coaching. If you're a coach and you want to coach champions, that's how we evaluate that in this. It's so hard to get a perfect score on either test. And the students that are capable of it and actually achieve it are so remarkable and inspiring. Don't you
Well,
find that?
yeah, because I think at that level,
Yeah.
you're fine tuning, and the fine tuning requires such skill, I think,
Yeah.
on the part of the tutor. So you're
Yeah.
really pulling a lot out of yourself
Yeah.
and learning. I feel like sometimes I learn so much more. I think about things differently
Agreed.
through the eyes of those particular students, right?
Right. The students that are coming in that need help with understanding systems of equations or punctuation rules, right? Of course, that's part and parcel of what we do. But there's another level when you get past that. What's really holding you back?
Right.
What do we need to unlock? So it's not like, if we were coaches of sports where we helped our teams achieve championships or our athletes achieve gold medals, we would be really highly paid keynote speakers. That's a whole
We
other
can only
level.
we're going to dare to dream on being high paid speakers someday, Mike.
One day.
That's on our list now. That we're going to add that to our list, right?
Yeah. Okay. So now we're going to start manifesting that.
No, we're going to. I told you. Yeah.
I
Well,
know. I know how you are. That's
well,
okay. Good.
my manifestation is now hopefully that I'm going to China in the summer. So stay tuned to that. But yeah, no, I
Oh, I
mean,
know. That's going to be
well,
fun when we talk
I
about
think
that.
the thing is, you and I have been in this industry for so long that it's just so exciting to be able to take advantage of any opportunities within the industry, new things, new
Yeah.
projects, even, but also too, interacting with other test prep professionals who come to us with questions and concerns. I love nothing more, than talking with people and feeling like,
I
wow,
have a coach. I mean, like I
right?
have a call, just somebody has a question, one of our colleagues, and I'm going
Yeah.
to talk to him. I mean, like
Yeah.
that happens all the time. Yeah. And so Roots to Words is more popular like every day. I just can't believe
I
how
told
many
Annie
people
about
are
Roots to
calling.
Words. Annie yesterday. So Annie,
Oh,
my
yeah, Annie.
my soon to be 10-year-old, she came when we were talking in the car, she was like, "Can you give me some words that if I use these words like that would make me sound smarter?"
Wow.
And I was kind of like, "Okay." And so we're talking and I said, "Well, something's not good, it's beneficial, or something's not bad, it's detrimental. If something's really bad, it's egregious." And so I was throwing out words. But then, you know what I said to her, Mike? I said, "Oh my God, Annie, you should totally be subscribing to Mike's Roots to Words," because I said to her, you get a word a day. He tells you where the word comes from. You get the definition. You get a sentence. And so she was really,
If
she
she
was
does it,
really
I'll quiz
interested in
her.
that.
I'll make sure that she's keeping up on it.
I know. I
Yeah.
don't think she has an email yet, but I'm like, oh, okay. You got to check out this
Oh,
Substack.
so listen, this is my pro tip, my life pro tip to all parents. You're supposed to secure your child's email address. They're professional, they're
Mm.
real adult email
Oh, that's
address
smart. I didn't
when
think
they're
about that.
born, so you capture their names.
I'm going to do, that's on my to-do list now.
I am the proud parent of Mason Bergen at
You guys,
gmail.com and Ivy
I'm going to,
Bergen at gmail.com.
there are some of you guys, like obviously our colleagues, that are so much more visionary than I am. Because I was actually thinking about this the other day about buying domain names, but I'm
Right.
laughing. But you're right. Get their email, right? Makes
Yeah.
total sense. Yeah.
And then the last thing that I did last month, which is dovetails to your last month, is I don't often have time to do the ACT instructional mastery training, but I was able to do a 2-day math training and a 2-day science training for educators, high school teachers from 6 different states. And it was just fantastic. It was always so good to connect with high school teachers who are enthusiastic about helping their students achieve college and career readiness and figure out just how to help them do better across the board. It's always, and I always learn from them.
Well, and I think what's interesting too that some people might take for granted is just because you're a math teacher or an English teacher or reading or science or what have you, and I'm not sort of dissing high school teachers, it doesn't mean that you understand the test or the nuance of the test. So for us, I think that's why it's especially powerful is we're getting people who are interested, they're engaged, they're in these fields, but we get to share something with them that kind of comes from like our territory of what we see.
Yes, and they appreciate our perspective and our experience in a
Yeah,
way that the average high school teacher does not seem to.
right. No, 100%. Yeah, while you were doing your math and science last week, I was doing my English reading.
That's right.
We've both been sort of put in these buckets of like, I do the ELA, you
Yeah.
do the math and science. And
Even though we can both do it
even though
all.
we can do both, but it's like, it's so interesting, right? To be able to do that. Well, I guess the next question is what's coming up for you, Mike? What's happening for you and as we get
Well,
into
so by the
April?
time this episode airs, you and I will have both made some important trips, family-oriented trips. Okay.
Yes.
So mine is a smaller trip than yours. I am going to visit my son. He lives in Colorado Springs, and he's turning 21
Oh
on
boy.
St. Patrick's Day. That's his
Oh my
birthday.
God.
Yes,
Yes.
he's our little leprechaun.
That's right. I keep forgetting that Mason was born on St. Patrick's Day, right? Yeah.
As I was driving to the hospital, my wife was already there, and I was driving to the hospital on the night of the 16th. I was like, do not let him be born on St.
St.
Patrick's
Patrick's Day.
Day. I just talk about visionary.
Yeah.
I had a nightmare flash of him like in college and everybody getting him drunk on his birthday
Right,
and
right.
it just
Yeah.
going wrong because it's also St. Patrick's Day. But
Sure,
that
sure.
didn't
It's a good
happen. Like that
excuse,
hasn't
right?
happened. So
Yeah.
luckily he's turning 21 and so I'm going out to Colorado Springs to spend some time with him just like, hey, check in.
Sure. Nice.
My wife and we try to make sure we see him once every few months.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully you'll
Now,
have a
so
good
that's
time.
my small trip. And
Mhm.
I can't believe this is the third time I've been in Colorado. A different I've never been to Colorado Springs, but it's my third time in
Yeah.
Colorado in 18 months. And I like had been to Colorado once
That's
before that.
hilarious. You're like, you're making the trek back and forth. That's cool.
Exactly.
Yeah,
But
awesome.
where are you going? You're going somewhere really exciting.
I am headed to Paris with my mother. I've never, I've traveled with my mother, but not just the two of us together. So I'm excited about that. I'm actually really excited because I'm actually going to go to Versailles, which I really want to see. And
That's
people know I was
epic. I don't
supposed to
think
go to
people
Paris.
understand how cool that
Well,
idea is.
if
Yeah.
people knew, I was supposed to go to Paris with my daughter 3 years ago, Paris and London, and that was when the whole airport issues occurred in the summer, and we lost our trip to Paris, and we only ended up going to London. So this feels exciting because I was going to do this 3 years ago, didn't get to do it, but this time is nice because I'm actually getting more days there. So we're going to Versailles, and I'm actually really excited about going to Normandy. We're going to do a 1 day bus trip. I'm going to be able to see the beaches of Normandy, which I'm really, I'm a major history buff, so I love everything about that. And the one thing that people don't know, and Scott would laugh about this is, so my birthday is D-Day. My birthday is June 6th. So this feels especially appropriate that
Yeah.
I will be going to see the beaches of Normandy.
You'll be storming the beach.
And it'll be saying June 6th everywhere I go. Like, yes, that is a special day. Actually, the big joke of late is that my nickname should be D-Day. So there you go,
D-Day?
Mike. You can start calling me D-Day. Yeah,
I mean, is D-Day really better than ACT, Amy?
that is true. I got to pick between the nicknames. Yeah, I guess I would take ACT, but D-Day has a real fun sort of
Oh yeah, D-Day is great. Well, that should be your roller derby name.
my roller derby name. Actually, when I was kickboxing, I should have been D-Day. That should have been my kickboxing name. It was Slayer, but it should have been D-Day.
Slayer's
yeah.
good, but D-Day,
Right,
that's
yeah.
that's
So yes, I'm
deliberate.
excited about the trip. Be excited to share when I come back.
I
everything
can't wait
get
to see
do.
the pictures.
Lots of croissants, wine, cheese. That's
Yeah.
and that's my plan.
Just another day for you.
Another exciting travel day for Amy.
Well, that's fantastic. Listen, it's obvious that we could talk about ourselves all day. Unfortunately, we're going to have to call it here. Thank you so much, Amy, for sharing everything that's been happening.
Thank you for sharing tip with me, Mike. Well, this was awesome. We hope you enjoyed this discussion as much as we did. Be sure to join us for another fascinating topic and guest on the next Tess and the Rest.
Did you enjoy this episode as much as we did? Find expanded links and more for this and all of our episodes at our show page at testsandtherest.com. While you're there, be sure to explore everything the larger TestBright site has to offer, including real, expert, unbiased answers to the toughest admissions testing questions. Of course, we'd love for you to rate, review, and subscribe to Test and the Rest on your favorite podcast platform. If there's a topic or guest you'd like us to feature, just let us know and spread the word.